Hello and welcome to Snide's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guests today are frankly unreal. They have set sail into the vast TTRPG ocean as though they are the last of their fleet. But what do they seek as they cut loose from safe harbour, adrift amongst the stars? Is it something to solve, something to fear, or something heaven sent? What we can be certain of is that it will be something we can sink our teeth into, while we destroy well-known royal houses. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome of Black Armada Games, Josh Fox and Becky Annison. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for
Hello.
having us.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you both as Black Armada Games on the show with me. Before we go into a number of things I alluded to there in the introduction, how did each of you get into tabletop role-playing games, please?
Do you want to go first, Josh, or shall I?
Let's establish a fixed order and stick with it, shall we? You go first.
All right then. I've told this story before, so I want to apologise if any of your listeners have heard it. But when I was about 10 or 11, I was roaming through the school library and I found a book in which people were playing a role-playing game. On reflection, I think this might have been some sort of satanic panic morality tale, because the end message that one was supposed to take away was that role-playing was scary and bad and one should never ever do it. But after reading that book, I was like, that's what I want to do. And I remember very clearly saving up all my birthday money for my next coming birthday and buying the D&D box set, which was released in the UK, and it was black and it had a big red dragon on the front. And I don't even know which box set that was, but that's what I did. And I was probably 11 the first time I played.
All right. And Josh, yourself, how did you get into tabletop role-playing games, please?
I've got the classic origin story. Well, I guess. So a new kid turned up at my school moved into the area from elsewhere and brought with him the D&D red box set and immediately started running Dungeons and Dragons during our lunch breaks, and that's I joined that game, carried on playing with him and with that group outside of school as well, and like Becky, was immediately hooked and went and got myself a copy. My box was red, but it also had a big red dragon on it, so I think effectively the same box, and it had those dice that I'm not sure whether you coloured them in, but it had the set of dice that came with the box, which was lovely.
So similar, and as you say, a tale as old as time. No, that's something a bit different, but similar. But you were hooked by D&D. So as you sort of played through these box sets, made connections, friends, avoided satanic panic in your own particular ways. Where did your TTRPGs take you next, Becky? From sort of the library and the strange rituals of rolling dice you were sort of conducting. Where did your TTRPG journey take you next?
Well, I suppose for some people, my TTRPG journey may have taken into a bit of a left-hand turn, that I fell in with a group of older students at the school who were all playing TTRPGs. And they invited me into their D&D game and later into other games that they were running. And then they also dragged me. No, that's not true at all. They invited me and I ran screaming into LRP.
Oh, okay.
So I was about 17 when that happened, and so I went hard into live action role play for a good 3 or 4 years after that point. I was still role playing all the time as well, but LARP was where I went next.
Were you LARPing within the sort of the fantasy sphere, or had you moved into a different realm or setting?
Mostly fantasy at that point.
All right, interesting. And Josh, yourself, you mentioned the red box set. Where did your journey take you next?
So my recollection is that the next thing I did, apart from buy a ton more D&D stuff, was to get into Dragon Magazine, and Dragon Magazine carried adverts for various other role-playing games in it, which immediately caught my attention as looking, I was about to say very different. In reality, the first one I can remember is the Rifts advert that was like a picture of a robot shaped like a skeleton. And I was like, oh, cool, robot shaped like a skeleton. Yeah, that's not really that different from D&D at all, but it was a robot, and I do like robots. So yeah, got into Rifts, bought all of the Rifts books, didn't really play it very much because it's quite a difficult game to play, but I liked all of the kind of the pretty pictures and the cool setting fluff, and generally started getting more into the kind of science fiction end of things, if you count Rifts as science fiction, I guess. Like picked up things like Dark Conspiracy as well, and yeah, I did quite a lot of tabletop role playing of that kind of school right up until I got to university, and that's where Becky and our stories collide, and we both started getting into what I call social LARP, i.e., the kind of LARP where you're not holding a weapon at the university society.
Okay. So, having sort of crossed paths, as it were, when did you turn from sort of the strangers of different educational backgrounds into a fleet, into an armada? Where did Black Armada sort of originate? Was that your sort of origin story for Black Armada, or is there more to that before you created this company together?
I think it came a lot later, actually.
It did.
My dim recollection is that that's the period when we went to university. That's the period where we both started getting into game design, but we were designing LARP at that point, not TTRPGs. And so we did an awful lot of LARP design at university. There was our university role playing society covered everything from LARP through war games, board games, TTRPGs. There was really, really strong culture of designing, not just homebrewing your own adventures for an existing system, but designing systems completely from scratch, both LARP and TTRPG. It was a very active society. At the point we were there, they had about 40 people turning up regularly. We ran 2 to 3 events every single week during term time. So it was a very, very vibrant environment for us to kind of cut our teeth or learn how to design. It was really quite incredible. And then we both went and got jobs.
Curses.
Which
Curses
really
life.
Still worse.
really put a bit of a cramp on how much role playing we were able to do and how much design we were able to do.
Well, see, I'm going to disagree.
Oh,
Obviously,
you're going to
clearly, I
disagree.
cannot disagree that we got jobs. That is a fact. But during, like, in the, I'm going to say 10 years after we finished university, we continued to socialise with quite a lot of the people who we'd known then, and pick up more people in our social circle of role players as well. And we would go roughly once a year away for a cottage con. Lots of people do this. It's not particularly revolutionary, but we did a lot of playing, a lot of different types of games there, and a lot of the games that were run there were designed by the person who ran it. So I mean, I think we probably would have termed it homebrew then, but people were quite serious about it. They weren't just kind of making a few tweaks to an existing system. They would be designing whole cloth stuff, and some quite innovative things, and also some quite broken things that didn't work. So we learned a lot that way, and I certainly did quite a bit of design there. I think, like Becky, I would kind of draw my design roots back to those LARP days in university, but also to the subsequent tabletop cons that we did.
I think moving on from the cons to just fill in the last chunk of the backstory, I think that after we had been doing that for a long time, and we were still continuing to role play, but just on weekends and not quite as intensively as perhaps we had before, then we started looking at the indie movement that was coming out of, I think, mostly America at that point, and it was very vibrant on the G+ scene. So for a while, it felt like anybody who was into indie RPGs was on G+ talking about game design and starting to use Kickstarter. And I think that's really eventually where Josh and I got to. We were watching this movement and going, oh, maybe all of this time that we've been spending designing just to entertain our friends, maybe we could have a punt at doing it for other people.
I also remember there's a convention near us. We live in Chesterfield in the Midlands, which is very near to Sheffield, and there are quite a number of role-playing conventions run in Sheffield. And we popped along to, I think, Furnace probably, and met Kevin Bartode, who at the time was part of what was termed Pompey Crew. I don't know whether that group still exists or whether they still design, but he had brought with him a game which I continue to love, which was quite transformative for me in a way, called Which the Road to Lindisfarne. And it was just this little pamphlet. He must have produced it quite cheaply, I imagine, and he was selling it like £6 a pop. And that was a kind of a moment for me in a way that I could see that this was quite a quick and easy thing that he'd done. I mean, the game was well designed and so on. It must have taken a lot of work to make, but it wasn't a kind of big hardback thing with tons and tons of art. It was a thing that I could pick up and flick through, and that made me kind of think, wow, this is quite achievable. Actually, we can do this.
Yeah, and so you sort of, having sort of seen and learnt from others, and Josh, you mentioned there from sort of the simple pamphlets and sort of smaller creations that other people have made, you have gone on to create so many, and we are going to touch on a few of them very shortly. But before we move on to what you have done or released and where you're going next with your products and releases, we've spoken about where you came from. Where can people find you, please?
Oh, the enormous list of places that you can find us. So, should we list off the enormous list of places? Our website is blackarmada.com, and you can find, if you forget everything else that we say, of course, this is a podcast, so you should just be able to wind back. Don't be lazy. Just go and listen to it again. But blackarmada.com, you will find a link to pretty much everything that we do there, including our podcast. We have an actual play podcast called Black Armada Tales. You can Google that. It's the top hit. It's a lovely little actual play that we do. Lots of different games, indie stuff mostly. I commend you to check it out. And then we're on social media all over the place. Becky, why don't you start our social media roll call?
So we are on Twitter. I'm on Twitter as Becky Annison. Josh is on Twitter as Armada Josh, but then there's also the Black Armada. Is it Black Armada 1?
Mm-hmm.
Black Armada 1, I believe.
Black Armada 1 on Twitter. We have a Patreon. If you search up Black Armada on Patreon, you'll find us there. We've got an Itch.io store. Again, just Google that Black Armada or search up that Black Armada on Itch.io. You've recently been revamping our socials, Josh. Is there anything I'm missing? How far and wide have you spread us now?
Everywhere. We're everywhere.
wow.
There's Black Armada Black Armada Games on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. I think I'm actually Rabalias on Instagram, which is just really unhelpful, but some unfortunate person.
That's the name of an NPC from a campaign as well.
It is. Took my favourite handle, so I had to go with that one instead.
And Mastodon. We're both on Dice Camp at Mastodon.
Wonderful Dice Camp. Yep, Armada Josh and
Becky Annison.
Becky A.
Yeah, Becky A or Becky Annison.
And now we're on TikTok. I'm very excited. I've made my first TikTok video like 2 days ago. I'm going to be stuck there forever.
Well,
I think I'm Black Armada Games on TikTok. So if anyone is on there, please come and follow me because I'm very lonely.
All right. Well, I will make sure there are links to all of those places down in the description below this in the description below this podcast. I was about to say the right thing. Yeah, so itch.io, Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Mastodon, and the website itself, plus wherever else I can find, there will be a link there. So scroll down, plus your personal sort of Twitter accounts as well. I'll make sure there's a link to as well. So please scroll down and follow this link. Support Black Armada and these two fantastic content creators and game designers and just all-around good people. Mention their game design. We sort of built up through learning off of others and the LARP and sort of moving through the cottage con, as it were, the sort of not homebrew, but sort of intense sessions of learning and trial and error. And you have released through Black Armada Games website a plethora available on Itch, as mentioned, of games of such a broad spectrum. What's it been like to sort of move into different genre of game, as well as create different systems to support each of them?
Well, from my perspective, I love it because I'm well known amongst our home gaming groups, that I will play and enjoy pretty much anything. I have very eclectic tastes and I enjoy a huge range of genres. And And I think I just invite anybody, really to do that, because you can learn so much from different genres and apply them in different and interesting ways. And so I think from my perspective, I can't speak for Josh, but from my perspective, it is absolutely a reflection of my incredibly eclectic tastes.
No, I think I'm with you. Like, I will play anything if I can find the right group to play it with, and that's usually the bottleneck, isn't it? Is finding if you can find a group of people who are into the same thing that you're into. I just think we're living in a golden age of role-playing game design, really, in that, yeah, you can go to our store and find dozens of different types of games, but you can go onto Itch.io or Drive-Thru and find millions. And anything you think you'd like to do, you can probably find someone who's designed it. Yeah, it's a wonderful time to be a role player.
And to pick out some of the ones that are on the front page of your website and the store. So bite marks, Becky, recently used by Rendezvous with Destiny, the podcast, wonderful people over there. What was that like to create a werewolf pack mentality game that really draws on that sort of primal side of what it means to be a person, I guess?
No, thank you. Honestly, this was an absolute labour of love, and it was a labour of love from two sort of different directions. Firstly, I played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness games when I was at university and enjoyed them very much. But the werewolf game, I love werewolves. I wanted the game to hit, and it just didn't quite hit for me. But I loved a lot of the stuff that the World of Darkness were doing at that time, and really enjoyed it. So that was kind of part of it. And the second part is that I have a deep, and I mean deep, and abiding love for the trashy supernatural werewolf genre. I have read, I don't know, 50, 60 novels in that sort of genre. I just gobble them up. They line our shelves. Josh is constantly saying, "Can't we get rid of some of these and make some space?" I'm saying, no. This is a very, very specific genre of werewolf novels, and Bite Marks is the game that will allow you to experience that very specific genre. And one of the things that was so exciting for me about doing Bite Marks was that the woman whose werewolf novels got me hooked agreed to write a stretch goal, which was just so mind-blowingly amazing, and I will be forever grateful to her, both for the fact that she did a stretch goal for my game, but also that she wrote the novels that started it in the first place.
I mean, feel free to give her a shout out, and I'll put a link
Kelly
down
Armstrong. Kelly Armstrong and all of her amazing novels. She doesn't just write werewolf novels, they're just my personal favourite. She writes many other brilliant novels as well.
Absolutely. Well, I will make sure there's a link to Kelly's work down there. And Josh, Unreal is, from personal experience, unreal. Nearly Role Players did a take on it for Instagram recently. What was it like to put such a twist on a social construct game or sort of situation with Unreal and sort of the Big Brother take?
Yeah, well, it's strange, isn't it? Because like Big Brother, in a way, Big Brother's kind of a long ago thing. I do remember watching it, but I haven't watched it in absolutely years. But we're living in a golden age of design, and one of the ways in which we're living in a golden age of design is that there's an absolute ton of solo journaling games coming out. Now, I personally, a thing that I miss if I'm playing a solo journaling game is the opportunity to interact with other role players, because I really enjoy getting their creative contributions and reacting to them. It's just my favorite thing. It's why I often GM, actually, is because I kind of sit there and I soak up what everyone else is doing and then kind of throw it back in their face. But that's what I wanted to do with Unreal, is create a game that you could do all of the role playing on your own schedule in the comfort of your home without needing to get a group of people together, but that you had something to bounce off. And I just thought the opportunity to record silly little diary room videos and then watch all the other players' diary room videos and say, what he's just said is a load of rubbish. That's not what happened at all. Was just, yeah, it really it was an idea that sparked sparked my imagination. And then, of course, you can't just make it the Big Brother house. It has to be something weird is happening in the Big Brother house. I loved what you guys did with that, by the way. Some excellent moments of absolute panic and weirdness, and the excellent announcement: one of the housemates has been found. Should I spoiler this? Might someone still want to watch it? Dead in unusual circumstances. Let me put it that way.
I'm full credit to Matt of Merely Role Players for sort of corralling us as a group together to perform that, and it was such a joy and such a great system that I'm looking forward to potentially the opportunity to do it again in the future. Obviously, I don't want to dictate Matt's schedule or anything like that, but it was really a lot of fun. And you mentioned there a lot of solo journaling TTRPGs coming out or RPGs coming out, and let's not shy away from the fact that you have your own as Black Armada games coming out. Wreck This Deck, which is so different to what I've seen. I think that's the politest compliment I can give without swearing. They're so different to what I've seen previously, and I've had a chance to sort of go through some other ones with other content creators, but Wreck This Deck has such a unique element to it. I can really see a lot of people getting enjoyment from it. What was it like to stack the deck?
So that game, the kernel or the germ of an idea was set, I think, when Josh and I were playing Pandemic Legacy, the first edition of it, which we played, I think, in 2019. I think we played it over 2019. Every time we managed to get some childcare, we would crack open Pandemic and do another game of it. And
little did we know we were preparing
little
for
did
the
we
year
know.
that would follow.
I have to say, I haven't played Pandemic since the end of 2019, and we finished that. I've lost my taste a little bit for it, which is a shame because it was a firm favourite of ours. But I don't want to kind of spoil the people too much for Pandemic Legacy, but there is a point in Pandemic Legacy where you have to rip up a card, and Josh refused. He refused, and he couldn't bear the thought of doing it, and I snatched the card off him and ripped it up in two, and I was like, there is something here. There is something here about the kind of the hesitancy in Josh, the sense of transgressiveness of taking a board game piece and destroying it. What could I do with that? And then all sorts of other elements and ideas came in my youth back in the 1990s. Whilst I never participated, I was an avid viewer, I suppose, lurking around on the internet of the artist trading card phenomenon, where anybody would take, it was pretty much a playing card size card, I think, and they would draw or paint or do some beautiful collage on it, and then you would post it out to other artists and sort of start collecting a little pack for yourself. It's almost a little bit like what people do with zines. You know, people make their zines, they do 50 copies, and then they kind of swap them with their friends, and you end up with a pack of zines. People used to do it with modified trading cards called artist trading cards. And that was really the kind of the combination of that and Josh's inability to destroy a board game piece is what led me to the idea for Wreck This Deck, which I should probably explain for your listeners. You modify playing cards with paint or art, or you can just scribble on them, or you can burn them or sew them, whatever you want to do to them, and that is representative of you trapping a demon inside it, for which you then do magic. And it's a journaling game because you want to keep a journal of your experiments. You want to keep a log of any conversations you have with the demons, because this is dangerous business and you might need a record of what happened in case somebody wipes your memory or something goes horribly wrong. And so I constructed a journaling game, but I really wanted to have this transgressive element to it, of amending, altering, modifying, and the reason I chose playing cards is because they are cheap and they are ubiquitous and anybody can get hold of it. I've often said to Josh, I would love to do Wreck This Deck with a deck of tarot cards. I think that'd be very, very cool, but that would also be very, very expensive. Whereas you can get a pack of playing cards for what, about £1.50 these days?
Something like that, yeah.
So barriers to entry, want to keep them low.
Absolutely. So within Wreck This Deck, and for those that want to follow it across social media, hashtag Wreck This Deck. Make sure I throw that one in there.
Hashtag Reckless Deck RPG.
Oh, there you go. I'll make sure that's on.
Very important. And do check that out, because most of it dates back to lockdown. During lockdown, people did some amazing things on that
beautiful.
hashtag. There are just really beautiful works of art there, alongside people just pulling out a Sharpie and writing swear words on a playing card, but it's honestly some amazing stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely. So a broad spectrum of content underneath hashtag Wreck This Deck, but check out hashtag Wreck This Deck RPG to follow and support Wreck This Deck TTRPG, produced by Black Armada Games. So within the sort of the game itself, we're not left alone. While there is a rule set, we have Jax to sort of guide us through and be our deck runner. What was it like creating Jax, and how it was using the deck runner to explain the mechanics? How did that come about? Who is Jax?
Jax is the character that I created when I was playtesting the game to play it. So she is my character. And I think it just felt to me that so much of this game was about the DIY and passing on knowledge, through social media or through oral tradition or word of mouth, and that when I wrote the game, and I don't think I've ever done this in any of my other games, I wanted it to feel like it was being explained to you by someone who knew what they were doing, like it was being passed on to you. You were the recipient of that word of mouth. And about halfway through, I kind of kicked myself, because actually it's quite hard to explain game text entirely in character, and it's not always a good idea, if I'm honest, to explain game text entirely in character, because sometimes you just want to be able to really clearly say to somebody, and this is the thing that you do next. And having the one step remove of the author writing a set of instructions is quite helpful. Having an NPC saying it is less helpful, but I think I got away with it. I think. I'm not sure I'm not sure I'd want to do it for anything more than something like a zine like this, though. I think that if you take one of our bigger games, like Lovecraft-esque or Flotsam or Bite Marks, I think when you are looking at a game with that level of mechanical complexity, I think that I would shudder to write the whole thing in character, and I would be forever worried I was failing to explain it properly.
So having this sort of unique take on how the game is explained and how the game is played with the deck of cards and the other sort of components called up upon it, what are some of the most significant sort of components almost to this game? Which cards stand out as sort of the most important cards of the deck? Is it a standard 52 deck? Do we need anything extra? Do we need to make sure we retain any cards within our deck in that respect?
Oh, very cool. So yeah, it is using a standard 52 card playing card deck.
Or
And
54, in fact.
54? No,
Because you need the jokers, don't
you
you?
need the jokers, but is that not 52?
No,
Have I got
52
it wrong?
is without
Okay,
the
so it's a
jokers.
54 card deck. My mistake, everybody. Sorry about that. So I was really keen, and I kind of ranted about this on Twitter the other day, and I was sort of saying, every game I have ever read, every card game I have ever read, has always started with the instruction, remove the jokers. Now, I'm aware, thanks to Chris from Loot the Room, that there are card games out there that do use jokers, like Canasta. I've never played any of them, sadly. But I think the first thing that I wanted to do was, because the initial instruction is always remove the jokers, I wanted the first thing this game required of you was to do something interesting with the jokers. I very much wanted to keep them inside the deck, and because there's two of them, there's a really nice symmetry there to what you can do with them.
So what is it you do with them
Oh,
in layman's terms?
In layman's terms, so because this is a game about summoning demons, you want to keep yourself safe. So the first thing you do is inscribe a pair of matching sigils on the backs of the jokers, and then you keep your deck sandwiched between the two of them, and this provides a modicum of protection. And then the second thing that you do is inscribe your character's name, although in the game text we call it your true name, but inscribe your character's name on one of the jokers, which makes the deck yours, so that nobody else can use it in quite the same way.
And so, at time of recording, within a few hours prior, Josh, you were making promo videos. I trust Becky was safe in the making of this promo.
Mostly. We did set fire to a card, and only part way through realised the card's mostly made out of plastic, so we may have been inhaling carcinogenic fumes as we did it. And I have to say, I kept on recording for quite a long time
Yeah, you
after
did.
the fire had gone out and the smoke was billowing up. I was like, oh, I got to get this smoke. And then afterwards, I was like, shit, have I just given myself cancer of the mouth and throat? I don't know. We'll see. Ask me in 10 years' time.
I did feel a bit woozy afterwards. I feel that may have been a step too far even for our art.
You have to play the hand you're dealt, I suppose.
It's true.
So with promos being made, the game sort of being put together, the low barrier of entry, when and where can we pick up Wreck This Deck?
Right. Well, we are launching on crowdfunding. We're using the BackerKit crowdfunding platform, and that's launching on the 1st of June. There is a pre-launch sign-up page if this episode goes out before the 1st of June, but the same link will take you to the campaign proper after it launches on the 1st of June. So that's a nice thing there. Yeah.
All right. So BackerKit, we can pick it up. We can maybe not set fire to every playing card in the deck and potentially have hazardous outcomes. But with respect to the deck and how it interacts, there's a part of the game about trapping, almost willingly accepting demons into the cards or trapping demons into the cards. And some of the demons that you have in the release that you kindly sent out as part of the sort of the press pack, there's some big names, some big hitters in that list of demons. I know Becky on Twitter again. You mentioned wanted to use the 40k ones as well, but
Oh, yeah.
let's stick with the more accessible ones for now.
Absolutely.
What was the attraction to choose those particular demons?
So I wanted originally when I started it, I was thinking about the demons either that everybody has heard of or that come from the traditional demonic grimoires that do exist and that you can go and read in the part of the sort of the Keys of Solomon tradition or the Goetic tradition and things like that, because I wanted a game that felt kind of rolling up your sleeves, DIY, getting messy, getting your hands dirty. And I think that one of the cool things on the hashtag is that people have started inventing their own demons, which I absolutely love. But for me, in order to cement the feel of the game, that it was this kind of punk street DIY magic, I wanted to start by taking these very traditionally named demons that some of which people will recognize, some of which, if you go and research them on Wikipedia or everything, you'll find out they'll come from the similar grimoires as the ones you do recognize, because it felt like you have this very long tradition of very, very formal demonic magic. And what I liked was taking that idea of this long tradition of formal demonic magic, and people since kind of Witchfinder times have written about this sort of thing. Dante's Inferno also kind of riffs off. They're taking this very, very long and venerable tradition and jamming it together with taking a Sharpie and writing it across a playing card and making it into this very DIY punk themed. And I just really like that. It felt to me that it took the theme of transgression, doing something to a playing card that you're not supposed to do to it. We're supposed to just put it in a box, play a game with it, and put it away, put it on the shelf. Doing, setting fire to things or stitching them, whatever. You're not supposed to be doing it to playing cards. And also, treating this long tradition of very, very serious and po-faced demonic studies with a similar treatment of this is not what you're supposed to be doing with it. You're supposed to have, a lot more ritual and proper robes and proper things like that. And instead, what we've got is almost sort of, taking inspirations from my own lexicon of things that I like and things that I have enjoyed. Things like John Constantine. That sort of street magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this game does have the potential, depending on the player, potentially sort of could lead into darker areas. Is there anything contained within the game, within the book itself, to help safeguard oneself as a player? Or, as Josh has mentioned, you're able to interact with others and swap cards and things. Is there anything in there that sort of can help keep the player safe?
Well, I mean, let's remember this is just a game. These things aren't real. We're just using playing cards and having some fun. But I think there's a couple of there's some rules in the text that you are required to follow. Firstly is using the jokers to keep yourself safe, but certainly things like be kind. You're doing street magic here and you're doing gutter magic, but you're doing it to help other people. You're doing it to be compassionate, to try and tweak the world a little bit more in the favor of people who need help and people who are vulnerable, and a little bit away from the kind of the people who hold all the power. And that I wanted to keep that as a really strong theme throughout, is that you're not doing this for selfish reasons. You are doing this because the world has become unfairly tilted towards certain power structures, and you're trying to flip that. I think that's part of it, is that's kind of holding on to that sort of center of the character, is saying the people who are doing this, they are doing it for good reasons now. Whether they end up falling down a dark road, I would say as a role player, embrace it if your character starts falling down a dark road, because that way is just more interesting story. But I think that also, again, using the hashtag #WreckThisDeckRPG, you can interact with other players. You can ask them for help. You can have little micro storylines playing out with them over social media if you want to. And I had, when I was originally playing the game and playtesting the game, that happened where in the fiction, I had drawn a luck demon into a card, and this was too heavy for me to handle. So I did actually physically post it off to another player, and it's still in their deck, and they're still looking after it for me. And maybe one day I'll ask for it back. We'll see.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, seeing what's on the cards, I will stop these puns one day. That is where Black Armada is now. We are, at time of recording, close to the backer kit pre-launch and launch of Wreck This Deck. Again, support the game and Black Armada and these two wonderful content creators and game designers, following the links down in the description below. But where is Black Armada going next? What's on the horizon for Black Armada games?
Well, the very near horizon is the second edition of our not quite first game, but first big game, Lovecraft-esque, which we wrote and published back in 2015, I think. And at the time, we were just kind of dipping our toe into the water of making a game using Kickstarter, and very sort of worried about risk and making sure we didn't accidentally end up with spending far more money than we actually raised. At that time, we badly wanted to create something that looked a lot like a board game that could be used to tell an eldritch tale, and we kind of shied away from it in the end because it felt kind of too expensive, too risky compared to producing a sort of more standard RPG in a book type format. But we are now ready to come back and take that game that we wrote and make it what it was always meant to be. So that's where we are headed in the immediate future, and that's actually our plan, is to fund that later this year in around September time. So watch out for that.
September 23. Happy with that. So, with respect to Lovecraft-esque as it currently exists, and the second edition What have you learnt as content creators and game designers between these two phases? Is there anything that you have seen within your own work, or anything that you have seen in other works that have inspired you to maybe tweak the game or tweak your processes to content creation and game design?
Well, I think a big learning point from the first edition, as people started playing it more once it hit Kickstarter, was that people really like to have some inspirational prompts to build off. And the first edition was very much a kind of a framework for telling an eldritch tale and for pulling out the negative stuff that Lovecraft put into his work, his racism, for example, and building an emergent mystery. But in terms of what was actually kind of at the core of the game, it was kind of a blank sheet of paper for you to write your own horror story from nothing. And we did supply a whole stack of scenarios in that book, and we found that people really loved the scenarios because they gave you not like the sort of scenario you might find in a more traditional role-playing game where it tells you exactly what the story is going to be and who the baddies are going to be and what's going to happen, but the germs of the ideas that you can use to riff off and build your own ideas from. And that's essentially moved into the core of Lovecraft-esque second edition now. Every clue is generated from a prompt on a card, and that prompt will give you numerous sort of jumping off points that you could take, numerous directions you could head in, but it gives you something to get started with for let's face it, most people faced with a blank sheet of paper, it can be a bit of a creative blocker. So it's giving you a lot more to build on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Becky, yourself?
I was probably going to say that I think that we, but especially Josh, has learned an awful lot more about just the business of printing. So luckily for us, or not luckily, Josh worked very hard on the budget for Lovecraft-esque, but Lovecraft-esque 1 did turn a profit, but because we did not have any footprint, we didn't have an existing business, people didn't know who we were, we decided to do it as print on demand to cut the risk down. And that was the first game we ever did on print on demand, and I think it's always been our view that that is the only game now we will ever do as print on demand. I think it's really great for getting started, but we're now at a stage where just the logistics of doing it means that if you can tip into the area of doing a print run, it's just so much better on many different levels. Even though POD printing is much higher quality than it was many years ago. So I think that's another one. There's more of kind of the business of game design. Maybe I'm kind of showing people how the sausage is made too much, but I think that we both felt that if we had known how successful it was going to be, we would never have done it as print on demand. We would have done a print run. And so subsequently now, I think that's the biggest learning point for us, wasn't it, Josh?
I think so, yeah. I also want to mention there's been a few games that have built on the engine of Lovecraft-esque 1A. I can think of 3 off the top of my head, but I think there's more than that. In fact, there's 4, including Stealing the Throne, which has really created its own engine out of that. I know The Soul Survivor by W.H. Arthur, Cobwebs, the Conspiracy Theory RPG, and my personal favourite, Bleak Spirit, which is, now I'm going to say Certain Death Games. That is right, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Chris Longhurst took our game and made a kind of Dark Souls emulator out of it. And we have stolen a bit of technology from that, which I really loved, which is a rule. So obviously, it being a Dark Souls emulator, it has rules for combat in it, which is you don't get in a Lovecraftian story so much. And essentially, the rule it uses is you crowdsource from the other people around the table the possible negative consequences that result from you defeating a monster. Clearly, you're not going to defeat many monsters in a Lovecraftian tale, but we have stolen the basic idea of crowdsourcing consequences and incorporated into our game. So that's a change that's come about there.
That sounds worryingly exciting. I don't know. Yes, I'll stick with worryingly exciting. So with Wreck This Deck with Lovecraft-esque second edition sort of being sort of put through the mill in that respect, with all your current outstanding game output and all the places you're available. Again, links in the description, and we'll get them again in just a short while. Do you have free time? Do you get spare time for you? Question mark.
Well, we have to. We have 2 young children, so I mean, is that time for you? I guess in a way it is, and in a way it isn't. But you know, as you know, being a parent means you have to give a lot of your time to the other people who you want to enjoy time with, and who you need to give your time to help them to grow up. And we spend a lot of time out with our kids, enjoying the countryside where we live. And we also have a secondary hobby, don't we, Becky?
We do. We have a family hobby outside of hiking in the Peak District. We have a family hobby. Do you want to?
Which is smashing 12-year-olds. That's what we call it.
We do. We as a family, we do mixed martial arts together,
Okay.
and we do family classes together. All 4 of us. And I think we're doing it sort of 3 or 4 hours a week.
Wow.
That kind of length of time, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just great for fitness and family bonding and things like that. So.
But most excitingly, you sometimes get to fight with children and beat them up. So it's very good.
Asserting dominance in a wholesome family way, I think.
I mean, the complaint you sometimes hear about martial arts is you might get hit in the face by a grown man, and I don't like the sound of that, but it's fine if you get hit in the face by a child.
It's family time. Who can argue with that?
Yeah,
exactly.
Moving on from that, I'm not sure I can, but we will. So you have Wreck This Deck, Lovecraft-esque, Flotsam, which is Flotsam subheader Adrift Amongst the Stars.
Correct. Yeah.
Last Fleet, and your sort in smaller games through itch.io like Elementary, Murder Mystery. I was intrigued by that. The sort of Sherlock Poirot-esque.
Yeah, that's right.
mystery.
So that is another Lovecraft-esque inspired and designed game, which I hope one day, I'll be honest, I have a dream that I will, if Lovecraft-esque 2E takes off in its board game format, that we'll get to do Elementary as well. And in the same way, it's an emergent mystery, each of you contributing 1 clue at a time, and building a sort of case around a murder that's happened. The difference with Lovecraft-esque, you're all kind of working together to drip in 1 clue at a time and build up to a horror. With Elementary, it's all about trying to frame the person that you have been given at the start as your preferred victim, and make sure that they are the one that the clues point to instead of somebody else. And then at the end, you do a kind of clue style, taking it in turns to be the great detective and walk it around the room going, and it was you were the one who hit them with a candlestick or whatever it might be.
Clue's such a great film. I'm glad you used that reference. Brilliant film. So yeah, that sort of piqued my interest, and something I'll look to pick up for myself and sort of try and run from my own group at some stage, because it sort of ticks a lot of boxes and sort of tickles that murder mystery and social deduction style of game that I enjoy from time to time. But you have so much going on and so much available, and it's fantastic. So we can find everything that you do and all the good stuff that you're producing, putting out, and allowing us to support. Where can we find you on social media and the World Wide Web, please?
Well, the best place to find me is generally Twitter. I'm Armada Josh on Twitter, and also increasingly Dice Camp on Mastodon. Armada Josh there also. But yeah, search for Armada Josh. You'll probably find me.
I'm Becky Annison on most things, including Twitter and Dice Camp, the Mastodon Dice Camp instance. I think we've tried to kind of pull as much as we can into our website, though. So if you can go to the blackarmada.com website, then you'll find access to our storefronts and our Patreon and all of that good stuff as well.
And we rather stupidly, up until now, have not mentioned our mailing list, which is
Oh
the
gosh, yes,
absolute
that was silly.
tip-top #1 way to find out about stuff we're doing. Because no matter, if Elon Musk decides to nuke Twitter from space, our mailing list will still be there. So we'll give you a link to put in the show notes for that as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, please scroll down, check out those links, check out and follow those links. Support Black Armada Games, these two fantastic game designers and content creators. Becky, Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show to talk through your various products, explore 52 cards of chaos. It seems hashtag Rep This Deck RPG. I'd love to get you back on the show in the future to discuss more of your products, or maybe to sort of run through in a one-shot style sort of scenario one or another of your games, if you'd be willing to come back and join me.
Very much so, yeah.
Absolutely. That would be so kind. We would
Thank you
absolutely
very
love to
much
do
for
that.
having us on.
We write the games that we want to play, so any opportunity to actually play them, we're right there.
Fair enough. We can sort that out outside of this
Thank you.
interview, this chat. But it has been a real pleasure. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the show, then go to www.snydersreturn.squarespace.com. Alternatively, you can find us over on Twitter @ReturnSnyder. We have a Linktree link in the description of this episode. And if you want to support us, come and join us over on Patreon. And we also have a Discord server. Please leave us a review, because we'd love to learn how to improve the channel and provide better content out for those who are listening. Until we speak again, thank you.